Thank you to everybody for coming to the 23rd Annual International Roxbury Film Festival. We're here today to bring out some issues that have been plaguing America. These films that were selected for today's Q&A deal around issues that have had us up in arms for centuries, for years, and it seems to continue to plague us into the future. So I really would like to start with speaking to each one of our directors, having them introduce themselves and their films that they've put together, and a little bit of the inspiration that they've put together to make the film that they did. So can we start with Sekou?
Gotta unmute myself. So hey, I'm Sekou Writes. I am an accidental filmmaker, accidental director, meaning that I did not set out to make a film. Rush and I were test driving a car. He was driving the car. I was shooting him driving the car. And we were just making a video literally about the car, power steering, Bluetooth, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we had a racially charged incident happen while we were doing that. And I decided to pivot and make a film about that instead of the car we were test driving. So I'm an accidental director and he's an accidental star.
Oh, that's good. I like that. That's the way to make it happen. And next, Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Furie, and I made The Talk with My Black Sons. It's a film documentary featuring 3 Black men about the conversations they have with their Black sons. And I felt it was really necessary to make this piece at this time in America where I'm struggling to figure out what other people's experiences are that don't look like me.
Excellent. Can we have Marius, please?
Hi, I was a moment there where I had to get the phone on mute. Listen, I really appreciate you guys having me. Yes, and I'm with Sekou Writes on Brown Boy Mad. It was an accidental film that Sekou and I were involved in where there was a racially charged incident. I like to say that Sekou's an accidental filmmaker, then I'm an accidental star of the film. It was a conversation really centered around what happens sometimes in America with our minorities and others in the majority community. And it just really turned out to be a great conversation for Sekou and I. And I'm hoping that this is going to continue to be a wonderful conversation for others. And it's something that we can all learn from and each of these films back to. Thank you.
Very good. And can we speak with Jessica for a second?
Hello, thank you for letting us have this space. So I'm Jessica Moore from Brooklyn, New York, and my film is Last Summer on Bainbridge Street. And it has ideas about gentrification in Brooklyn, New York, what's happening everywhere, but specifically in Bed-Stuy, the neighborhood I grew up in. And what inspired it was what was happening as I was growing up. Even when I was going to college and coming back, I saw the differences and changes that were happening in the neighborhood, and how some people, especially like in the Black community, felt left out about the changes in their community. And there was an article that I read where they were interviewing Spike Lee, and Spike Lee's father still lives in Fort Greene and in Brooklyn, New York. And there was an incident where someone called the police on his father, and definitely, like, my father, who I grew up with, is one of the people who's definitely out on the street, hanging out. Everybody knows him. And, to me, it was just, at that point, I thought, well, this could happen to anybody's father, and this could happen to any Black man in America. And so I thought it was special to make specifically a story about a father and son.
Okay, very good. I think that's very important in today's society, the gentrification of our neighborhoods. We want to ask also, is is it good or is it bad? Or this is something that, because were we having problems prior? Are they better addressed now? So I think that once we get down to the nitty gritty, we really have to start to think through some of the issues and having our neighborhoods to ourselves where we less inclined to work together, or are we better at working together now with white neighborhood partners in our neighborhoods? So can we hear from Rashad?
Hey, what's going on?
How you
How
doing?
y'all doing? I'm Rashad Frett, the director of K.I.N.G, acronym for Kid in Need of Guidance. It's about a young troubled youth that's trying to connect with his father, who wasn't really a part of his life. And you know, it's a story of him, you know, becoming a man. It's a coming of age story. It was inspired by my personal life as well as amongst my peers who, you know, grew up without our father around, or present but not present. So I noticed that this is like this is part of a deeper issue in the Black and brown community. And you know, I just felt that, you know, I bring it to the forefront.
Thank you so much for doing that. It was an excellent film, and we are definitely want to talk about it, share it with each other, and see if we can find out how we can start to alleviate some of those issues. And last but not least, we have Desmond.
Hey guys, I'm Desmond Jackson. I'm a filmmaker based out here in LA, and I currently go to Chapman University in the MFA directing program. My film is Dreasjon, and it follows a young Black military veteran who describes his experience with war, but the threat is someone who you don't expect, and he also struggles with whether or not to go to a protest. So the film is really inspired by Dreasjon Reed, who was killed by police in May 6th of 2020. It was right after, I believe, Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and right before George Floyd. And I, for whatever reason, really took his story really to heart. He was only 21 years old, and this was in Indianapolis. But yeah, just hearing about it really broke my heart, and I decided to, you know, base the film around his murder. So yeah.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the things that have really shook the Black community this past year was the George Floyd situation. All of us kind of felt that we were going to lose this situation one more time, because it's been so hard for us to really get justice in our direction for quite some time. I'd like to know from each one of you, I know you either put your film together prior to the George Floyd incident. Did you have those types of feelings during or after the making of your film, that we are going to see some justice, or we're not? Because each one of your situations, even though they're different, they're the same. They plague the Black community. They continue to delve into issues that we have had for a very long time. And I wanted to see from each one of our directors, did the George Floyd situation inspire you more to even write something different or something other than what you've already put together?
I think we missed somebody.
Did we miss?
Yeah.
No, we just got one in. Angelo.
Yes, hi. I think, yes, I came a minute late, so you might have missed me. So yes, my name is Angelos. I'm from Greece, and my film is Colorblind. And I actually decided to make the film, as you were just saying, during the summer of last year, when everything was going on in the States, and I was home in Greece, and I just realized that it was not possible for me to take part in what was going on as actively from here. So I thought that I should use my filmmaking knowledge from school and just try to give it my best shot and do what I can. So yes, my film is about police discrimination, and I wanted to use film to basically show that there's not enough progress in how the Black community has been treated over the last few decades. So in regards to your question, I think the George Floyd incident definitely inspired me and just made me act more rapidly and give me more energy to basically do my best and create my film.
Well, great. Thank you for being here. I think it's important that you made that film. I really have some very important questions about how you shot it in black and white, and why did you do that? And it was a very good, very well done film. So can I speak with Sekou for a minute, because I believe he wanted to share a little bit about his situation as well, as far as it delving around the George Floyd situation. So Sekou, you got
I wanted to piggyback on what Angelos was saying about the unfortunate timelessness of it. Because actually, my film, Test Driving While Black, was created in 2015. So it was created a long time ago. And actually, the Roxbury International Film Festival was the first film festival to show it then, when it was a rough cut. And as I said, I was test driving a car, and Rush was the proxy. He was driving the car. It was just supposed to be about this vehicle. And this incident happened, and it wasn't even with police officers. It was just white people who felt like we did not perhaps belong where we were. They were questioning us about where we were, what we were doing. And one of them was brandishing a gun, and it was just a really tense situation. And so I made the pivot, and I had to have an uncomfortable conversation with the car company, because that's not why I used the car. I was using the car to talk about the car. And then I decided to lean into that and make this film about test driving while black. And what's interesting about it for me is that people think that I made the film just now, and I made it 6 years ago.
It's very current.
And people have asked me specifically about George Floyd. And what I've said is what I just said to you, that I actually created the film a long time ago, and it just shows you how timeless these issues are. And also what I've said on another note about George Floyd is that I feel like it is the Edmund Pettus Bridge of our time. The Edmund Pettus Bridge was the bridge that they crossed during Bloody Sunday. It was Martin Luther King and Representative John Lewis, and it was about voting rights back in the 60s. And when they crossed that bridge, they were attacked by the state troopers. And that was not unusual, but what was unusual was the fact that there were television cameras, photographers, and it was broadcast all around the world. And I feel like the same thing happened for George Floyd. Like, that situation, unfortunately, wasn't unusual. But what was unusual was the fact that everyone was sitting still because of the pandemic. Everyone was glued to their screens. And so that incident got broadcast around the world. And I think, just like with Bloody Sunday, where there was a before and after, there will be a before and after with George Floyd.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's something that is still yet to be unfolded. That we're going to have a lot of talks and a lot of serious talks with others around each one of these incidences that we have before us, because it's important that we start to make some strides. We start to make some changes in America as Black individuals to better ourselves and our lives, and to move things forward, because they have been stagnant for quite some time. We've been showing how we can change the world and change others, but it seems not to stick for a very long time. It'll happen for a minute, and then it seems to revert right back to its original state. And we have to learn how to change it and make it stick. So Jessica, I know Sekou had an issue around his situation as an accidental director of his, but your screen was done on purpose. You had very much direction and structure put around your film. And I wanted to hear from you a little bit, because we had a little discussion yesterday about how the structure of your film in the narrative and the setting the tone was important, and how each one of the films that you've created were different from one another. So can you give us a little light as to the pieces in your current film are different from the others that you made?
Yeah, when Sekou Writes says accidental filmmaker, I'm like, oh, what's that? It always seemed like this adventure. But no, it's interesting. Well, last summer on Bainbridge Street, well, I'll just say how it's different a little bit. Like the last film that I made was in AltFest, which is an LGBT film festival, and it was at Anthology Archive in 2016. It's called Unattainable, and that was more of a surrealist film where I was experimenting with sound design and mixing. But last summer on Bainbridge Street, I really lean into neorealism. So I experiment in this film a little bit with non-actors and actors. And so like one of the non-actors is actually my grandmother, and people seem to love my grandmother in the movie. She plays grandma. But so I experimented with like different techniques of just improvisation as well in the film, just like the handshake that the father and son, Tyshawn and Sean, have. That's something that they came up with when I just told them, you guys need to go spend time together, like go play soccer, go play basketball, just get a relationship together. But yeah, I personally like to experiment with different factors of filmmaking and different structures.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very interesting. I think that even though I'm a novice when it comes to the film world, I find that the subtleties that you folks put into your films make it very poignant and gives us hope and direction as to what the next scene of the film is. And it really does stick to the storyline that you're trying to achieve. And it helps us to really to understand and get your point across in such a small amount of time. I think that the information that you share actually transcends to America in many different ways in such a short period of time. I'd like to talk to Mr. Frett about K.I.N.G. Now, we know in America that the issue around fathers and sons and fathers who are absent is a huge stake. And how we are going to make our fathers accountable in many different ways is important. Just doesn't happen in Hartford, Connecticut, where this was shot. It happens around the country. When you put this film together, tell me what was one of the most important features that you had in this film that you wanted to bring out to the audience, because you had several in there.
So, number one, people didn't know that Hartford, Connecticut had a huge Caribbean population. So, so that's one of the stuff that I put in there. Secondly, in the, in the Black community, I mean, like what I wanted to put in there is that, so the actor that I had who was playing Jediah, that was his first time acting. I actually found him in the Virgin Islands because I was supposed to film it in the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
Yeah, so I found him, and he, ironically, he grew up without his father around. So when he read the script, he kind of embodied that role. And, you know, when we spoke, we had similar experiences. So it was just more so like just shedding light on that aspect and trying to use it to, you know, spark conversation, because it's rampant and it leads to like other things, you know, like incarceration has a huge effect, you know, the aftermath of stuff like that. So
it was very interesting, and we really enjoyed it a lot. And the pieces that are in there, like we were talking about to everybody else, I think it's so important that we continue to play a film like this, because it's I'm sorry to say, as a Black man myself, we're not getting it.
right.
We have to really start to bring those other fathers who are needed to be in line along with those who find this to be a big issue, because it is one of the biggest issues to me in America today. When a young individual is not brought up in the right direction, they're more inclined to be those who are institutionalized or are having problems throughout their lives. So fathers and mothers in their lives can be very beneficial. Angelos, your film, which was very important as well. I think Colorblind being shot in black and white was one of the first things that sat with me as a important film. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came about in your thought process? You being in Greece, I'm sure there is not a large population of people of color. Help us to understand why you went to that piece.
Yeah, so I mean, in regards to the color, I thought it was it would be an interesting challenge to try and shoot a film that depicts the 1960s. Of course, that came with many challenges, starting with all the production, the cars, the house that the film was shot in, the outfits. But in regards to the script, the idea initially came when I was thinking about the script, and I realized that by using black and white, I could convey the message that I wanted regarding police discrimination much better. And that was that a black man is stopped in the 1960s by the police, and everything is black and white. And then I thought I could use color as a transition and transition to the present, and have the color change to modern movie colors, but everything else remaining the same, meaning that the black man is still stopped by the police after 50 years. So the idea was that some colors have evolved while others have sort of remained stagnant. But yes, in regards to the black population in Greece, unfortunately, it's very small. I mean, we have Antetokounmpo, of course, who is very well known as a black Greek around the world. But it was definitely a challenge, even finding actors and finding people who, you know, I could work with. But I was actually happy because I realized that although the community is small, there are still a few actors who are well known and have a great reputation, and they're very well respected. So I was happy to even take part in that culture within such a small country, meaning Greece. So yes.
Well, it was very good. I just want to say, I'm not mad at you, but you guys just put my Knicks out of the playoffs in basketball. So I'm not mad at you. It was a good game.
Yes.
Can I get Desmond to talk a little bit about his film, and how did the George Floyd situation impact you guys?
Yeah, I think for me, in regards to making this film, I think I was really impacted by the protests surrounding George Floyd and the aftermath of his murder. You know, I would say I was one of the people struggling with whether I should go out to protest, because, you know, there's a lot of things to consider as like, you know, one's safety. You have other loved ones who like were also concerned about me going out. So I had to like take that into consideration. And I think a lot of those thoughts weighed heavily on me before I eventually did go out and protest. So I think I wanted to encapsulate that within the film, and I know it's only a minute, but I wanted to see what if this character was also struggling with it. So yeah.
Very good. I mean, one of the things about protesting in today's society, it's an iffy situation. You know, years ago, you would look to go and protest with everybody, but now with the things that are coming at you where the police are being as aggressive as they are, as we see on the news media, you don't really feel safe. And you want to be able to do a peaceful protest and get home safely as well. So I understand where your thought pattern is on that. It can be taking your life into your own hands. You know, did anybody else go out to protest in the George Floyd, because it was around the country? Did anyone else take into their liberty to go out and do something or have an opportunity to do that? Or this is a round robin if anybody needs to talk.
Okay. Yes, I did. I was definitely in a protest. I know one of my friends was maced by the police before, and someone else was like bashed in the head and had to go to the hospital. It was a rough, dangerous time from what I remember, and it was COVID.
Mm-hmm. You were in Brooklyn though, right?
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn, but I went to protests in Manhattan and Brooklyn primarily.
And this happened in Manhattan? Or
Brooklyn, actually.
In Brooklyn, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. I think we have to just be as careful as we can, but we have to find ways to get our voices across. Anybody, please talk to us about our next steps. We know that your films were, but yes, Sekou, I see you.
Move on. So I just wanted to give a quick comment about a couple things, the protests including that. So I forgot to do the whole intro thing. So I am a New York-based professional creative. I'm currently in Nashville. I was in Nashville working at Fisk University when the pandemic happened, and I'm kind of from here. So my mom and my aunt are here, and I wanted to make sure that they were squared away. So I stayed through the pandemic in Nashville. So it's kind of home, but it's kind of new to me because I haven't been here for this long a period of time, I think ever in life. So I've only usually come down here for Christmas and I go back. So anyway, the protests happened here and I was kind of documenting it. That's the other thing I wanted to get to. I do a lot of different things, but in the context of this conversation, I'm a journalist. So I was documenting some things and I thought this was really interesting. On one side of the Capitol, there are all these protesters and they're carrying signs and they're very heated and they're agitating for change. And then I was driving, so I drove to the other side and there was just drunken revelry on Broadway. And it was fascinating to notice the dichotomy in thought, in life, that there could be such a two disparate lives happening. And I happened to be there when they converged, when the protesters came around the corner and saw the revelry and they were like, wait, is the protest over? Like, what's happening? I saw people kind of quietly put their signs down because they weren't sure how to process what was happening there. And that was very powerful to me, that, you know, that it's possible to exist without having to think about these issues that we have to think about all the time. These issues of race and racism and how they affect us. And so that was very powerful for me. And then I also wanted to circle back to what Jessica said about me being an accidental filmmaker. I forgot to define that too. So again, in the context of this conversation, I am a journalist. I write about cars. So I test drive cars and I write reviews. Like, so I was test driving the you know, the Toyota RAV4, and this is what the steering was like, and this is what the sound system was like. And so I started off writing, and then that evolved into shooting videos to, you know, be more descriptive about the cars. And so when Rush and I met up that day, we were test driving a minivan. And sometimes it's helpful to me to have someone else talk about what's new to them about the car, because I've been in that system so long, I get a little jaded. So it's nice to have a fresh perspective. So his role was to just sit in the car and talk about how dope the car was, how cool this minivan was. And then all these other things happened. And I think, you know, I'll let Rush talk about what happened, because, you know, I was just behind the camera, but Rush became the star in that on the spur, he started talking about race and racism and race-based assumption and all these things that were in his system to talk about. And that's what made the film. So I didn't want to say all those things.
Well, understood. Rashad, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll chime in about the both our experience with the film and just the idea of protest, period. You know, the one thing that is similarly situated among all of our films here is the experience of race in America. And unfortunately, part of that shared experience is that there are these two things that are constantly going on, not only in our country, but in our personal lives. That there are these two selves that are constantly happening, where we are balancing that inner frustration that happens as a result of race in America, and then also trying to balance that inner frustration with a different kind of outer behavior that requires calmness, consistency, presenting a different self. Almost what Sekou is clearly describing in his experience here in Nashville. That one side of town, there's a protest, and on the other side, there's this fun and revelry. There's always a constant, I feel like the Apostle Paul now, he mentions it in the Bible, that there's a war that's constantly going on within our members, within ourselves. There are two parts of each of us that are constantly happening, and we're constantly battling against both of those. About protest, period. I mean, we can all agree that there is absolutely no change that ever happens without struggle. And, you know, I actually Frederick Douglass, that's not mine. Without struggle, there absolutely is no progress. My personal experience with protest, and this notes my age, goes back 25, 30 years with Rodney King. That protest 25, 30 years ago, it came out of, again, that war that's constantly going on within us. An inner frustration that had been happening for decades, centuries in America, where we are constantly feeling a bottled anger out of our existence here in America. And when something happens, and in that case, that something was Rodney King. Most recently, that something was George Floyd. And all of those feelings that we all have end up coming to the forefront. And then when they come to the forefront is when the protests happen. And until we, you know, really confront those issues, both inwardly and outwardly, there's going to be something that is constantly happening, which makes all of our films timeless in that sense. Exactly. You know, when Sekou did his piece, this was 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, and yet it's still just as impactful now as it was then. Our experience in Test Driving While Black, as Sekou has mentioned, had absolutely nothing at all that day, had absolutely nothing at all to do with any protest. It had absolutely nothing to do with our own feelings that are happening in America around race. Had absolutely nothing to do with racism at all. For us, it was all about a car. Mm-hmm. We were test driving a vehicle. Cool, I hope it's okay for me to say what car it was. But I'll just say that it was the nicest minivan that I'd ever seen. Extremely nice minivan. And I was, you know, being at the time a new father with younger children, I was really excited about the minivan itself. Life was transitioning for me from a sports car to a minivan. I was like, hey, we're going to go out and enjoy this minivan. Maybe this will be my next purchase. Little did Sekou and I know this thing was going to become something other than about the car itself. It was about the life that we're all experiencing, where we were immediately accosted by just two individuals. They had no badge. They were not police officers. What they were two people that felt a sense of entitlement that forced them to be less than kind to the two of us. They were brandishing weapons, and they thought it was their responsibility to make sure that two Black men were where we should be. It was their responsibility to police us. It was the most uncomfortable experience for both of us, but while it was uncomfortable, it also was not uncommon. It wasn't uncommon in the sense that, again, this was something that happens, an experience that happens, unfortunately, with most Black men at some point in their lives regarding a vehicle, where we are forced into these interactions around race unexpectedly, and then have to manage that inner frustration that is in all of us over a course of years or decades, and try to make sure that everyone stays safe and calm. Not just in this case, Sekou and I, but this also could have been an unsafe moment for those persons that decided to accost us. Is it necessary to continue to have these conversations? Absolutely, because I don't think these things are obviously going to end, and that all of us are here now talking about a similarly situated incident where, other than being filmmakers, the other thing that ties us is that we're all in the same country, sharing the same experience, and unfortunately has not yet changed. I'm hoping that something happens from this conversation that does change.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want to just ask, but do we think since this incident, this is to anybody, do we think since this incident that it has brandished a bigger and bolder white community?
I can go on that. I think that while I was interviewing my interviewees, I was learning about their Black experience in America. And I think a lot of them were saying that there's change happening, but not very quick. Or some of them were saying that change might happen soon, or at some point, but not in my lifetime. So I think there is a positive outlook on this as well, that there is some change happening, but I think almost still not enough is what the answer that I was getting from them.
You're right about that. I think that does anyone know or feel that our past president was a cause in this scenario where there seems to be a white community who is now more bolden and brazen to do, because there has been an uptick in incidences across the country. Is it all because of our past president, or is it something that's been brewing prior to the George Floyd situation? Anybody?
I would say that I feel like these incidences have been brewing, before George Floyd, and I think maybe Trump was the impetus or reason for people to be more vocal about it. But I feel like those innate feelings were always there, and maybe Trump was just a way for people to have an excuse to be more outspoken about their overt racism towards folks. But I think we also need to look at the phenomenon that, even before Trump, that, Black people have to deal with a lot of microaggressive covert racism before the overt racism. So I think that can be just as damaging to us internally with, our confidence, our self-esteem. And we're always in these white institutions that beg us to accommodate them to our detriment. So I think we have to look at the situation twofold, where I think even though the incidences of overt racism and racist acts may have increased, we also have to look at how we're still dealing internally with the microaggressive racism and the covert racism that is just as damaging.
Thank you for that. I think that the capitalization of what we're trying to achieve, now that we've described, talked about, and have feelings and have a legacy that you gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, have put forward in your films, we have it now documented. We have to continue to show these films, not just in this type of scenario, but around the world. Why not have pieces like yours in info commercials on major networks? Why not have the kind of information and what you're trying to describe? Because I think the way that we start to lift ourselves out of this situation is not to continue to talk about it, but there has to be a national uprising, a national way to continue to put this in the faces of those who are still in denial. And we want to know from you folks who are the filmmakers and the legacies that have put your works out there, is how do you see us moving forward to get your pieces, or what would be your next piece, or what do you think you can do to build on to make this an even more important situation? Anybody? I know I'm reaching, but I want everybody to get an opportunity to talk.
Yeah, I think that this does spur the conversation. I think that I was really interested in having conversations with people that don't look like me, that have experiences that I don't have. And I learned so much even just from filming it. And so I just keep trying to push it into other people to be like, watch this and like learn something about somebody that you don't know or you don't look like. And so like Leonard says in my film, trying to get people around the table who don't look like each other or speak differently or pray differently so that we can all learn about each other. And I think that on a massive scale can start to have more empathy in people that can then maybe make more change.
Excellent. Excellent. And then my last question, and this goes out to each one of you, I want to know from you guys.
Can I just respond to what Sarah?
Please go ahead, Sekou.
So the beauty of what happened with Rush and I is it's a common experience. Like, technically, I was test driving the car to write about it, but test driving a car is a common experience. You go, you want to buy a car, you test drive it. And so the fact that that happened to us in what looked like us just test driving a car has created some empathy. And I've seen the evidence of that because we've been invited to screen this film and have conversations with quote unquote allies. And, you know, originally the film has been kind of preaching to the choir, but now, you know, 6 years later, all of a sudden people across the aisle, so to speak, are asking to see the film and have discussions about it. And we've had some really interesting conversations. And it really is about making the incidents personal. Like, this was a test driving situation, but I also talk about the fact that when I bought my first car, I was almost beaten by the police the first time I sat in it. And that really resonated with people because everybody remembers buying their first car. That's a human experience. Everyone has had that. And so to the extent that we can communicate these universal experiences and show the difference between what it's like for us versus what it's like for someone else, I think that really engenders a different type of conversation.
Yes, it does. Very good. I agree with you 100%. The conversation has to continue, and it has to definitely be filmed, talked about, and shown across America, even the world. I want to thank everybody for coming as well. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you in our last piece is, what are you guys working on next? It's very important that we continue this legacy and we continue to see where your directions are, because there are so many issues that are in the Black neighborhood, and we need to continue to put out these types of segments so that everybody can see them and hear them and feel them. So can we start with, and not, I don't want to pull anybody out who may not be working on a transitional piece to what they've just finished. But if anybody wants to talk about what's in their making for the future, I'd appreciate it.
I'll go. I'm currently working on my thesis film, which deals with mental health within the Black community. So that's what I've currently got working on, and I hope to continue to make films in the horror genre. And kind of speaking to one of your last questions, I really hope that filmmaking in general and my films in general continue to bring healing within the Black community, because I feel like we need a lot of that in order to properly move forward. And another suggestion I would have to anyone who wants to, push the conversation forward is, I think those of us in the Black community, we really need to read what our previous scholars have written about all these instances. I just finished reading Huey P. Newton's To Die for the People, and he was the co-founder of the Black Panther Party. So I think reading that has given me a lot of insight on how to tackle situations from like protesting to organizing the Black community. And I think I would just encourage everyone to kind of like pick up books like that in order to further push the Black community forward.
Thank you very much. One thing I would urge you to do is to put your email in the chat so that the rest of the filmmakers and those who want to contact you could utilize that and get with you if necessary and when necessary. Okay, anybody else?
I can go next. So what I'm working on next is, well, this was my master's thesis last summer on Bainbridge. So I'm working on my first feature, and I wanna spotlight just the intersections that are in the Black community. Like, I'm Black and Jewish, so I wanna like delve into like Black, Jewish, queer lives and how that is specifically in New York, because this is another film that's gonna be based in New York. I liked Desmond Jackson's question or sort of suggestion where everyone should pick up a book about like, race theory, things that scholars have talked about previously. Like, I'm reading Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. And Desmond's like, yes. No, it's a fascinating book. And one of my other majors was actually like political science when I was in Syracuse. So it really fascinates me. And I also have Black Skin, White Mask, which I'm going to read next. So yeah, I think everyone should just share what they're reading right now. And that should be the other part of the.
Okay, that's great. I think that should be, we can't wait to see what you have, what you're putting out, and we're definitely looking forward to it. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go. So again, I'm not really a filmmaker, and this happened accidentally. And so what I'm trying to do is get Rush on camera again to talk about some more issues. But also, I just wrote a play. I became a playwright during the pandemic, and I created this autobiographical play about race, rage, and survival. And so that's the project I was working on at Fisk University. And I'm converting that, but I converted it into a film of sorts because we couldn't convene to see the play. And so that's what I'm working on as the next project. And I accept Jessica's challenge. The book that I'm reading is Black Like Me. I got that from Rush, actually, because Rush was talking about that when he shot this 6 years ago. And it was about this white man who became Black by taking these pills and changed the pigmentation of his skin, and what he discovered when he traveled through the South as a Black man.
Wow, what a class. Very good. We like it. Go ahead, Rush.
Yeah, the book was actually by Tim Wise, who did a parody of Black Like Me, and his book was White Like Me, and really goes to the point about denial and the movement of personal accountability. as we begin to really have these conversations about race. What Tim Wise talked about was this inherent racism that is in, and this is his thought in the book, this inherent racism that within whites here in America, that it's just impossible to be white in America and not have some level of issues with race or racism. Just as impossible to be a male in America and not have some really negative, strong positions on sexism. It's just impossible for men to not to be totally removed from sexism, as much as Tim Wise was saying that it's impossible for whites to be totally removed from racism. Hence, it goes back to the point of denial and constantly being able to have these conversations. The book helped me understand, and I think it also obviously helped Tim Wise understand his own issues with racism that was kind of innate and or learned by being a white male in America, and really pushed him to think beyond denying that that's a fact, and helping him to do more in terms of confronting his own inner racism and how that plays out in America for the rest of it. So my book then was Tim Wise, White Like Me.
Very good. I definitely have to pick that book up. It sounds very interesting. I continue to tell my kids and my significant other that racism in white folks is more of a DNA issue, and it's something that's inherently born into them, and they cannot get away from it, no matter how much they say how many Black friends they have. So I have to continue to think that way. Does anybody else want to share? Very good. Well, my time is just about up. It is, I had an hour. It is exactly 6:30 right now. Yes, I see our friend from Greece is back on. Would you like to say something?
Yes, so my current film, it's not exactly focused on racism, but it's basically focused on taking a deeper look into a city, an American city, and seeing how different people can be living so close to one another, and their different life experiences and perspectives on life. So it's slightly more philosophical. And in regards to the book, I just started reading a book called Cast, which I was recommended by quite a few people, and it speaks about the origins of the
yes, I
hierarchical systems. Yes. Okay. Yes. So I can't say too much about it yet, but it seems very promising.
Very interesting book. You'll have fun with that book. It's very good. I just definitely want to ask everybody to put your email in the chat so that it can be recorded. We can stay in touch. We can make sure that we are up on the things that you're doing and in the progress of doing. I'm really enthused by everybody and their information that they've shared with us today. Anything else that we need to share?
Yeah, so my next project that I'm working on right now, my thesis project is about a young ex-convict struggling with new freedom that pursues a job from his neighbor in hopes of redemption. So I'm working on that right now. My professor, Mr. Lee, is helping to fund it, and I'm also doing a feature for King. I'm writing a feature script for King, and I'm also in the process of writing a feature for this thesis because I've been advised to. So
Very good.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really want to thank everybody for coming out this evening, sharing your thoughts. I know that we have so much work to do moving forward, not just from the writing's perspective, but also from the protest and from the taking it one individual at a time to education and getting them the information that's necessary so they can really start to understand the Black struggle. So again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for taking the time out of your days, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna turn it back over to Lisa.
Oh, no, you don't have to turn it over to me. That was wonderful. Thank you all so much for your films, for all that you do. That was a great conversation. We look forward to your next projects, to the work that you're doing, and we will champion the work that you're doing now. So thank you all so much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Have a good one.